Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yedda Stansel, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. Welcome back to the Shut Up and Sit podcast. Hey, everybody, how are you? I have missed you. That might sound weird to you, but I haven't been on the microphone in a couple of weeks. I know in the podcast world, there's all these cool ways of how you record stuff, and we are recording in advance. But it's been a couple of weeks because we've had so many shows already kind of in the wings waiting. So it's been a couple of weeks since I've been on the microphone. And I've said this already a couple of episodes. I love the way it feels to put these headphones on and just start talking into the microphone like this. It's such a cool feeling. And also I've missed just talking a little bit about the content to you all as listeners. But the really exciting thing that's been happening since I've been with you all last is I have gotten some really great opportunities to talk to some local people here that live in Richmond, Virginia with me who've been listening to the show. I've been getting some feedback and emails from people kind of all around the United States and world who are listening to the show. And it has been so amazing to hear people and the feedback that you're sharing with me. So I love it. Keep it coming. And today, before I even get into what we're going to talk about, I just have to share with you, I got this one phone call and this person knows who they are, so they will remain nameless. And he called and he goes, "Hey, Yedda, I listened to your show, to the podcast." And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. And he goes, "It wasn't great." And I'm like, oh man, awkward silence. And I thought, okay, it's cool. Just take it in. People are going to have their thoughts, positive and negative. You guys are learning about this on the thoughts and the feelings. And then he goes, "It was fabulous." And I'm like, oh, whew, okay. So something I do have to share with you all as listeners, and I've had several meetings with former clients, now that we're starting to come back out into the world a little bit, people are getting vaccinated, wherever your stance is on that. That's not what we're here to talk about today, but I am meeting with people more, having more conversations. And I had another conversation with a client who's been listening to the show, and I do leadership development for her. She works for a really large development company here in Richmond. And she just started telling me what her thoughts were. I started asking her questions. And the funny part about all of this was I said, I've never listened to a podcast, ever. And Robin is behind the camera looking at me and he's like, "I know, Yedda, I had to tell you 15 things you need to know about podcasts." And I honestly, I have to admit this to you all, I don't listen to podcasts. I have no idea. I did read, I guess in the past couple of weeks, there's over 1 million podcasts in the world right now. Do you know that, Robin? 1 million podcasts. So it's the thing to do now. I guess everybody wants to create a podcast. And so what I found humorous in this, the client looked at me and she goes, "Well, what do you mean you've never listened to a podcast?" I'm like, never listened to a podcast. So I admit that in full transparency for you all. And I told her, I said, I show up, I shut up, and I sit down and I just start talking. And I do know my content. And I said, but the reason why I don't listen to podcasts, and the reason I'm admitting that to you all as listeners before we get started today is I'm teaching you all a product about how to show up and shut up and sit and go within and tap into your own wisdom. That's really what this whole work is about. Every single episode, as you're listening to these little tools and tips and science and psychology, I really want to teach you all what I don't see being taught, first of all, in the personal development industry. Second of all, I don't want to be tainted with what everybody else is doing because I'm not here to be a second-rate version of anybody else. I'm here to be the best version of me that I can be. So my theory and philosophy is if I show up, I shut up and I sit, and I just start sharing what I believe would help you do the same thing, then that will speak to you. And if it doesn't speak to you, that is fine. There are 999,000 other podcasts out there that you could go listen to. So I just say that to say it's so much fun to get the feedback from you all, and I'm loving what we're doing. But honestly, if nobody listened to the show, and I did admit this last night to a friend, I said, I would show up and get on the microphone every week because it's like therapy to me. I'm putting it out into the ethers. I'm just sharing. And if you find that of value and benefit, that's fantastic. And if you don't, that's okay too. But for me, the work has to be in the work, meaning if I'm teaching you these tools, I'm applying these tools to my own life, but I'm also applying them to how we put the work out into the world. So all that to be said is I'm loving the feedback. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you for giving me your thoughts. I am certainly open. If there are things you would love to see or have or do, and that's what I've asked a lot of people is, hey, so tell me what your experience is. Where's that landing for you? Is there value in the content? What else would you like to see or have? So it's not that I'm not open, but I hear that and I take that in organically. But then I've also learned the process you're learning along with me of learning how to check in with myself and say, okay, so where does that land for me? Is that something that I want to add into my own experience and my toolkit or not? And that's the whole value of going within first, so you don't get lost in the narrative and the constant mental chatter of everybody else outside of you. And so that's why we've been doing the show. So last time I was here with my mom, my amazing mother, which I've gotten some great feedback about how much everybody loves my mom. I do too. She's awesome. And we talked to you about the emotional guidance scale. And we could have talked for days, weeks, months just on that one component. But today I'm actually carrying forward from the emotional guidance scale into the 3 ways we actually show emotion. Like what happens once we get into the emotional guidance scale. And so as we dive into that, I want to just give you a little bit of bridge. And I know some people have asked me this, do I have to have the book to listen along to the podcast? So my moral compass answer is you don't have to have anything, no. But my cognitive answer of if you really want to ensure success, the answer is yeah, the book is going to help you do that. The book or the workbook version, only because I'm teaching snippets of it. As I said, the work's in the work. But I'm showing up and teaching you all content, and I'm using the content to quote unquote market the content. So it's not, bathroom selfies of Yedda with her Gucci luggage. Not that I have Gucci luggage, but, or some random marketing scheme to try to trick you into buying the book. I just thought, wouldn't it be cool if we just gave some of the content out and in the world, and then if people were inspired to want to get into the book or do an online course or do one-on-one coaching with me, they would know how to reach me. So you guys know that at the end of each show, we tell you how to do that. But I do want to be really clear because a lot of people lately have been asking me about the book. The book is just another level of going deeper into the learning, because I don't share every single thing in between the tools and tips that I teach on the show. And it also gives you obviously a chronological place to hold notes and thoughts and the contents in there. And if you want to listen to me for an entire year for 52 weeks, then yeah, you'll hear all the little teachable points that are in the book. However, you still don't get the full experience of the book. So my answer to, do I need the book? You don't need anything, honestly. Would I love for you to have the book? Absolutely. 2 things happen when you get the book. You, like I said, can follow along. The content's right there. You can refer back. You can fill in the gaps of what I didn't cover. You can read parts that I'm not sharing on the show. The other thing is you're supporting the show, and you're supporting the entire movement, and you're supporting the production of the podcast. You're supporting awesome people like Robin, our videographer, Chase, who's handling our posting and our notes, and all the other people behind the scenes, which I did sit down the other day and I thought, we've got like a half a dozen people that work behind the scenes on a daily basis to make this whole movement and this content come alive. And I love that by supporting the movement, and by you guys supporting the movement, we're supporting something really cool, and it's helping to change the world. So I'm just going to leave that there. You guys can decide what you want to do with that. But it has been a question a lot of people have been asking me. So whether you want it or need it, maybe you just want to offer to support the movement and the folks that are behind the scenes that are helping all this stuff become a reality for you guys. So with that in the book, we're going to move into going further into closing kind of the loop on the emotional guidance scale before I get into kind of how we express these emotions. And the reason that I want to do that is, my mom and I didn't really get a chance to talk about the aspects of where the emotional guidance scale lives in our body. So I want to give you a little bit of education. By now, if you've been listening to the show, you know that thoughts are mental units of energy. Those thoughts come down from our brain in neuropeptides, and they actually communicate with every cell in our body. And so when those thoughts, the mental units of energy, so emotions are just the energy of thought in motion. So when those thoughts are going down to the cells in our body, there's this really cool word called neuropeptides. I've talked about it briefly, but those neuropeptides actually create chemical production in your body. So when you're in the emotional guidance scale visual and you're looking at the right side, whoops, my page is bumping into the mic. When you're in the right side of the emotional guidance scale, what happens is you're in that downward spiral. So, for the lack of a better word, we love things to be labeled. Our brain just loves positive, negative, good, bad, right, wrong. So we're using the label of we're in that downward spiral. And so when we're in that negative emotion, our vibration gets lower. Everything gets worse and it's so heavy. Why is that? I don't know about you, but when I was in this journey, I thought, I've been in some funks. And when I went through the dark night of the soul of my ego, just kind of crashing and figuring out what I was going to do, where was I going to go, what was life going to look like moving forward, I was depressed. I was at the bottom of this emotional guidance scale. And it's one thing to say, and you heard my mom say, well, you just reach for a better feeling thought. And that's true, you do. And you step your way back up, hopefully all the way over to the upward spiral side of the emotional guidance scale. But here's something I want you all to know. There's an actual physiological response that's happening in your body when you're in a negative thought, because the negative thought goes down to the cells, and we know this from research. When you're in that negative emotion, I'm using a lot of finger quotations today. When you're in that negative emotion in the body, guess what the body produces? Cortisol, norepinephrine, cytokines, and histamine. And you might be going, well, I don't know what that is, Yedda. Okay, well, I'm about to tell you what it is. So these are actually chemicals in the body that actually cause death and destruction at the cellular level. So, cortisol is from a stress response. Norepinephrine, cytokines, histamine, they all cause an inflammatory response in the body. So when you wonder, why do I feel like crap when I think like crap? Because those thoughts trigger your body to actually start a chemical process. It gets a little code on the cell. These neuropeptides tell the immune system and tell the cells and the organs what to do. Your body literally responds with a negative chemical out into the body. And I thought that was just amazing. I thought, whoa, wait a minute, there's a serious mind-body connection here with our emotions. So, this is why you don't feel like going to the gym when you're depressed, or you don't feel like eating healthy when you're stressed out and anxious. You don't feel like responding with loving thoughts and kind words when you're in a funk and think something bad's happened to you. And so when we're in this, the reason I'm giving you so much information about this is it makes sense that you don't feel like it. You have to go back and you have to start thinking. You have to literally wake up or have somebody wake you up and go, whoa, wait a minute. What other option of thought could I pull from here? And so when we look at the cells and what's happening in the body, that's what's happening. Same is actually true on the positive side. When we're in a place of love, positivity, abundance, joy, those thoughts travel down to the cells in our body, and guess what? They produce the chemicals in the body. Growth hormone, dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin. So you have the capacity in your own thought process to tell your cells of your body to produce chemicals that are going to lift up your body literally and grow and expand it and create connection, or shut it down and eventually cause death and destruction. That's exactly the power your thoughts have on the physical tissues in your body. And so I might have known some of that early on in my career. And when I was in health and wellness, I was very fascinated. And one of those kids, and I'm sure if my mom comes back on an episode, she'll tell you, I was an incessant question asker as a child. Well, how come? Well, why? Well, what if? To the point that I literally drove people crazy. That's where I was told, shut up and sit. Shut up and sit down, Yedda, because I couldn't get enough answers to the questions. And, one of the things that's really funny, I was thinking about this because not in between the last episode and this one, I was telling a friend of mine, I said, as a kid, one of the biggest questions I had, and I would ask people all the time, is, well, there's a story in the Bible and it says, even the rocks cry out. And I was obsessed with, well, how do the rocks cry out? Can you imagine I'm 7 years old? I'm looking at Robin and he's like, oh my God, 7 years old running around. I'm like, so how do the rocks cry out? I really want to know, how do the rocks cry out? So I've been this person that's always been super curious, and I did get the answer to that question, and I'll bring it back around later and tell you what that is, because they actually do cry out. But nobody knew how to answer it. It was a quantum physics conversation, by the way. But so back to the cells of our body. They're responding, and these thoughts are going down and creating positive and negative things in the body. Well, we will go seek things to create dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin. Oxytocin is produced every time we have physical touch. So whatever form that is, a handshake, a pat on the back, a hug, physical intimacy at different levels. Even mothers, when they nurse babies, they produce a bond with the baby that comes from oxytocin exchange. So we're wired for human connection. We're wired to crave oxytocin. Dopamine pings in the brain. Sugar also gives us dopamine. Drugs and alcohol give us dopamine spikes. Social media, did you know that they've done research on our phone that every time we get a little ding, our notification goes off on our phone, we get a dopamine spike in our brain? So we are constantly looking for things to make us feel better. You've already heard the stuff about the chapter on health and well-being and what our behaviors and patterns do. But here's what I want to tell you. You have the capacity with your thoughts alone to produce those as well in your body. So we've been on this negativity bias where we're not, in my opinion, really connecting. So what I'm thinking is literally traveling to every cell in my body and communicating, produce chemicals. And am I going to produce positive chemicals? I get growth hormone. That's what babies produce. And it's a huge hormone when we're in adolescence and we're growing. Hello, how many people want to stay young? You have the ability in going within and shutting up and sitting and getting in touch with your thinking in order to shift these chemicals. I promise you, that's what's called a mind-body connection. So we are a combination of our mind, our body, and whether you want to call it spirit or soul, I use those words interchangeably. They all need each other. And they're all intertwined. So this idea of being a mindfulness person and saying, I'm going to let go of the body, I'm going to let go of the mind, it's not possible. Okay, let's just drop that mic right here. You're going to be in the body and you're going to have a mind until things change. And when you do, we're not going to be here with you and you're not going to be here with us. So until then, I think we all have an obligation to learn. How does this work? So I'm hitting you a little hard today with this. I'm passionate about this, but I didn't know that my entire inner freedom would reside in understanding thoughts. The energy of those thoughts transition and move into the body. They create chemicals, positive or negative. And so one last thing I want to tell you about this. They did a research study. They took cells from a human body, human cells, put them in a petri dish. They added growth hormone, dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin to see what would happen to just normal cells from the human body. They grew exponentially. They took the same cells, they added cortisol, norepinephrine, cytokines, and histamine. And guess what happened to those cells? They eventually got diseased, damaged, and died. So that's the power that thought has over us. It not only chooses our behaviors ultimately, but that thought goes in, creates in the tissues an actual emotional response that the body physically responds with. So it's a very complex system. Wouldn't you want to know about that? So the next time something happens and you're awake and aware long enough to go, oh, wait, let me just check in on what I'm thinking here, because I'm the one that's in control of my mind, not the other way around. That's why they call it waking up. Waking up out of the trance and going, wait, I get to decide how I'm going to think because I know that's going to create how I feel. And so I want to just make sure everybody hears that, because that's what really drives us into then how we handle emotions, which is the behavioral piece of this conversation. And when you have this information, there is real liberation. There's freedom that you get to say, I get to choose my thinking, my feeling, and then what I do is a response of that. Which leads us into what we're going to talk about today, which is the 3 ways that we handle emotions. And again, I was in another question where I was like, well, so, okay, if that happens, what do people do with those emotions? I'm wondering, are they all positive? Are they negative? Which led me into, remember I told you I read hundreds of books about this. It led me into some research that one of the doctors, it was a doctor that my mom referenced in her episode about just being able to let go and to understand better about this whole thinking, feeling, behaving process. And he did some research and he started looking at this and he said, the data actually shows us that people choose to do 3 things when emotion is present. So I'm going to run down the list with you. You can write these down. If you've got the book in front of you, you can certainly, make some notes in here. But the value, again, of the book is it's all written here for you. So you can add to it. But the first one is suppression/repression. All right. And that one, I'm going to read to you right out of my book. Suppression and repression are the most common ways in which we push feelings down and put them aside. In repression, this happens unconsciously. In suppression, this happens consciously, meaning you can choose to deal with your emotions either consciously or unconsciously. So that's actually the definition right out of his book. And I was really curious about that. And I thought, that's interesting. So if I'm unconscious, and that means I'm not even aware of what I'm doing, I'm just suppressing it. It's just automatically suppressing. However, if I am aware of what's going on and I choose not to deal with how I'm feeling, that's called repression. And so I thought, when in my life have I chosen to suppress or repress? And that led me to the question of mindfulness. Mindfulness gets us back in touch with what we might call an often uncomfortable place to sit in some silence. But it gives us the skills and the tools to learn how to go within and say, what is going on inside of me? What am I suppressing? What am I repressing? Am I aware of what's happening right now? And if I am, can I just bring that up into awareness in my mind so I can just understand a little bit more about what's going on? So what I think is really interesting about this, we all do all 3, by the way, and you're going to learn by the end of this, you probably have one that's your go-to and you might have a backup, 1 or 2. We all do all of these 3 different forms. We learn how we do these in our patterned environment. Remember our 4 components of being human? We learn these as habits. So here's what I think is exciting. Not only are these habitual patterns of how we were raised, and I have friends, one of my best friends who's coming up on the show soon, she was raised in a house where suppression and repression, definitely the way to handle it. The next one that's coming up, expression, was how my family taught us how to deal with what was going on. So these are learned patterns of behavior. And so they're all probably relevant and necessary at some point in your life, and you'll know when to go into each one. But I want you to understand, starting out, these are just patterned they're just habitual ways of showing up that you've learned. And at some times, suppression and repression are probably and might be appropriate. Maybe sometimes they're not. And so as you're listening to these, hold space that when you think about the suppression and the repression and the next ones I'm going to go over, this isn't about judgment of others and it's not about self-judgment. I just want you to walk away from today's episode knowing, when I have thoughts and they go down into my body and they move into the space of energy and motion, which is an emotion, I'm choosing to either create with positive responses in my body and or negatives through the chemicals and hormones that my body is making. And that's driving what comes next, which is how I'm expressing these emotions. So I'm going to give you a little bit more, and I am going right out of my book because I want to make sure you really hear these today and I don't get off on a rant on it. So what's the rest that's in here for suppression and repression says, the feelings we select to be suppressed or repressed are in accord with the conscious and unconscious programs that we carry within us from our social, custom, and family training. And that's the patterning that we talked about in these 4 components of being human. So when you go do the work to figure out your 4 components of being human, or your 4 conditions, as Philip called it, you start to get an insight into, how did I learn how to handle emotions? Well, what did my mom and dad teach me? What did my caretakers teach me? The second part that's in here is a bullet point in the book, says, suppression manifests as, are you ready? Irritability, mood swings, muscle tension, and various physical ailments and illnesses. Why is that? Remember the chemical hormones that are surging through your body? If you're in a negative emotion of fear and anxiety and depression and you're repressing and you're suppressing those emotions, guess what else you're repressing and suppressing? The hormones are cranking high, cortisol is shooting up. So you're holding the emotion in, but it has an impact on the inside of your body, and it is creating even more of those, what we would call negative chemicals. Now, they're negative in the sense that your body's not supposed to crank out cortisol and histamine and norepinephrine and vasopressin all the time. What that does is it actually literally constricts and kills cells. So a little bit in times of fight or flight have a very real reason that they exist, but we're not supposed to be living in a chronic, constant state of, fight, flight, flee, what other, I have another F word I'll throw in there, but my mom's trying to get me to keep the F words to a minimum. So, or you might do the other F word when you get stressed out. I don't know. But let me bring us back. So we're in the space here where I want you to understand that's why your body feels like shit, because the chemicals surging through it are not helping the cells in your body. And then so what happens is we decide we've got to feel better. So what do? We move towards something to give us a false sense of dopamine, of growth hormone, of the oxytocin, the vasopressin. All of those open up the cells, open everything up. So we're looking for false ways through drugs, alcohol, relationships, shopping, food. I could go down the list of things that produce this in your body. So now do you start to see the reason why we started with health in the beginning? If you remember back to the episode with JJ and his Twinkie trance. So he was in a negative thought, created negative emotions, went and grabbed the Twinkie because he was trying to get the dopamine spike to get out of the negative or the downward spiral. The problem is it's short-lived because it's like it shoots it into your body. Pharmaceuticals are the number. We go to so many doctors. I'm not knocking pharmaceuticals, but the truth is if we took responsibility and reclaimed our thinking, feeling, behaving process, you might find it might be a little bit harder. It might take a little bit longer, but you might find you could actually liberate and free yourself and keep cranking out the dopamine and all the awesome aspects of feeling good without having to rely on a synthetic drug or relationship or whatever habit you have that is filling that unmet need inside of you. So for me, the ahas went off and there was a lot of really cool stuff that I started going, whoa, holy cow. People who are really in a lot of suppression of emotion are suffering physically. Maybe if we could get them to back up and learn this process, they might have a little bit better health. And then the repression piece. So I just want to share this with you before we move on. I thought this was so fascinating. Repression affects the mind in a way that ensures it could stay out of awareness. Did you hear that? Repression affects the mind in a way that ensures it stays out of awareness. So it's like me going, oh shit, here it comes again. He's going to be this way or she's going to do that. So what I'm going to do is just, I'll take it and I'm just going to file it away and not deal with it. So you know it's coming and you know what you're doing. Suppression is, I'm not even aware of it. I just, I'm like in denial. All right. And so the best known methods of getting into repression are projection. So we will get into a whole conversation later about that. But the information comes in, we file it away, or we push it back to the other person and all of a sudden make it about them. That's projection. So we're in this really awful dance. We just don't want to feel what we're feeling. And all the while, we haven't been taught or trained to know you're the one creating it. So think about that. So we've got suppression and expression down. I think you got a pretty good idea. Suppression, I'm asleep, I'm unaware, and information hits me and I just don't even deal with it. Repression is the shit's coming my way and I'm either going to put it off in the pile in the house, literally let that shit stack up, or I'm going to throw that shit back on somebody else. Okay. And that's what we're getting into with the first way. So we've got two more I want to make sure I share with you. So expression. This one's my favorite. It probably wouldn't shock you. I am an expresser. I'm a communicator for a living. So I'm not saying you cannot express. However, we think we have a right to vent how we feel if we're somebody that leads with expression as a way of dealing with our emotions. And this was how my family was raised. This is what I learned. I live in a family of lots of expressors. I mean, tons of them. And my sister, who I'm close with, she has got this one down pat. And so we've talked over the years. And one day I said, here's what I had to learn. Maybe not everybody deals with emotions and handles them the way that we do. Maybe the hitting it over the head, telling you exactly who you are, what I think, and how things should go, maybe that's not the norm. And so we've had a lot of laughs because her and I have had some fun stories of our expressions and how we express. But the other thing is, and she's seen this for me, people who express, and I've got it listed here in the book, but when negative emotion gets released through expression, that looks like blow-ups, breakdowns, and I'm talking like toddler scale temper tantrums in an adult. Okay. So I am here to admit that this was my absolute number one way of dealing with my emotions. And I thought I had a right to express and dump my shit all over anyone and everything in my path. And what I learned through shutting up and sitting was I could build a container to really hold a safe space to allow the emotions to be with me. And I could keep them from going out into the world. And I could ask myself, okay, so here's how I'm feeling. Like my mom said, where do I want to be? I want to be in a better feeling place. Okay, so if I express this, if I repress or if I suppress it, I'm not managing the energy of what's been created by what I've been thinking. And so what I had to learn, and it took me years, you all have heard me talk about this on one of the episodes, especially the first one. My expression was literally, if you could imagine somebody doing a backflip out of a glass window in a Hollywood movie scene with grenades and the FUs flying and the machine guns, that's what I would do in person. It's what I would do on text, in email. Everyone I would communicate with would get the expression of what was going on inside of me. And so when I learned to shut up and sit, I learned to be able for a hot second to hold that. And maybe I didn't send 500 texts. I might have sent 400. The next time I might have sent 150. And now what I can say is, and I'm only 6, maybe 8 years into this process. Now I can go several days in silence, sit with, hold, contain, and say, do I need to hold this? Do I need to communicate something about it? Where am I going with what's happening inside of me? And that's that beautiful place of inner freedom and liberation, because what you realize is you have control over everything that's happening. And as my mom said, everything is neutral. It's the lens of how we're filtering it, how we're taking in the data, what we're doing with it, where we're going with it. So wouldn't it be really cool, at least I thought this, if I could walk into a room, show up, have an experience, be awake, aware, available, think about what I was thinking, be very intentional about where that was taking me emotionally, and then be very conscious and deliberate on whatever behavior I was choosing to participate in as a result. That's what's possible for all of you if you do this work. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. Do I have moments where I still can tweak out or maybe kind of sneak out a few negative? Absolutely. But I will tell you this, and this is the beautiful part of mindfulness and the beautiful part of shutting up and sitting. We don't stop the thoughts and we don't stop the negativity. We don't stop the contrast to where we live in Pollyanna land. What we learn is the ability to be aware. And the most important part is our response time gets quicker. Meaning I might still blow some shit up in my head, but I don't take it out into the world. Or I might still imagine going down some different thought tracks, and maybe I'll experiment with a way to maybe ask for something or do something differently, may not get the response I want. And instead of it taking 5 years, 5 weeks, 5 days, it might take me 5 minutes now to go, oh, wow. And then eventually what happens in mindfulness is those two line up. And literally as you're having a thought and you're then deciding what to do with it, in real live time, what shutting up and sitting allows us to do is to make another choice. And I had an experience with this last night, and I don't need to give you guys the details, but I was in a conversation with somebody and really trying to talk about who I was, what I needed, what I was trying to gain from the experience of being in a relationship with this person. And those are not things I've been skillfully trained in. So I'm learning and practicing how to ask for what I want in a way that inspires people to want to meet my needs as opposed to steamrolling them with a barrage of just aggressive communication. And my mindfulness showed up where I was able to go, hey, whoa, wait a minute. What you're saying is actually shame. And I don't want to be shamed for how I feel. Or, hey, whoa, wait a minute, in my inner narrative, if you say that, Yedda, that's probably going to hurt somebody. Why don't you go outside and take a deep breath and just get some fresh air and say, hey, can we just push this, push the pause button on the conversation? I need a little bit of space. And so as we do this work, then you start to create relationship dynamics personally and professionally where you get to show up as a whole person that you're not saying that I don't ever have negative thoughts or feelings or negative behaviors. What you're able to communicate to the world is I'm able to contain them and I'm able to recover quicker now because I sit with them. And that's what shutting up and sitting is all about. So, and at some point I will have my partner, Jeff, come on the show because sometimes he's like, you said what on that podcast? Because he lived through the dark night of the soul with me. And he's like, because sometimes he remembers and I'm not perfect, but I have to come back and go, I keep trying. And he, of all people, this is why I was like, you need to come on the show, babe. He sees the response rate get shorter to the point that literally in real life conversation, there's a management of my inner psyche. So let me give you the third one. You're probably in bated breath wondering, how's this going to end, Yedda? So the third one that we use is escape. And I know this one too. And I'm sure everybody out there knows escape. So escape is the actual complete and total avoidance of feelings through diversion. And this is what I have in the book. It says escapism and avoidance of inner awareness are socially condoned mechanisms. We avoid our inner selves and we keep our feelings from emerging by an endless variety of pursuits, many of which eventually become addictions as our dependency upon them grows. Now, this is where we get into the dangerous area of drugs, alcohol. You all have heard my story. Escape for me was a huge coping mechanism also for me as a kid. When I was really little, before I got introduced into drugs and alcohol, really escape for me was books and was movies and TV shows. So I would escape into my imagination to disappear from a lot of the crazy shit that was going on at home, the crazy shit that was going on in school. You'll read about that in my book. So this constant pattern of being excluded and feeling unloved and not wanted, the way I dealt with that was I just got lost. I have a massive imagination. I can go to places in my mind that would blow you. You would be like, yeah, I remember my ex-husband was like, you shouldn't tell people that you think like that, because I could have these crazy vivid dreams and imaginations, and guided imagery and mindfulness is one of my favorite things to do and to take my clients through, because I can take you to places in the universe that you didn't even know existed. And so for me, escape started as a very young age. But then it evolved into drugs and alcohol, which, it would give me the dopamine ping and it would do all that cool shit to make me feel high. That's why I call it high, people. You're literally high. And I'm not saying, let me put this out on the table. I'm not saying that there aren't people that could benefit from natural remedies to deal with anxiety or challenges that are going on in their life. What I'm saying is when we get to the point that we use substances to escape and actually avoid life altogether, that's where the challenge comes in. And so in reading the definition from the doctor, as he said, that's where addictions come, because we begin to rely on the escaping. And so we sleep in the trance. We don't want to wake up. And, for years through high school, I was stoned 24/7. I'm not proud to admit this, but, I could do a killer upside down bong hit. That's how I started my day. I was stoned and I was in escape in the drugs and alcohol world with my friends. And I was in the escape mechanism of still reading and watching movies and getting lost in fantasy land. And I never knew that that was wrong. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But when we're grown adults and we've got to get up and go to a job and we've got to take care of things, it begins to throw some kinks in the works. And so escape is where we are so desperate to stay unconscious that we can't even imagine facing ourselves. And alcohol. So I thought about this after my mom's episode, because she's been sober now for over 30 years. And I was sober for, I guess, maybe 15 years. Yeah. And then I started drinking wine a little bit socially. In the depths of my darkness, in my dark night of my soul, I probably drank a bottle of wine every night because I was bringing all this shit up into awareness, and then I just needed to escape from it because it was so hard to deal with. And so I don't have any judgment for people who are using substance to escape. But for me, the wake-up call came where I thought, I don't want to go back into this lifestyle. I'm highly predispositioned for addiction. So do I still have a couple of glasses of wine during the week? Absolutely. Do I know my limit? Yes. 1, maybe 2 at the max. Anything past that, it is a shit show that you do not want to see Yedda on. I promise you. I don't want to see Yedda on that shit show. So I'm aware of when those escape desires come. And when I do pull out the glass of wine, this is the way it works for me now. I look at the glass of wine and I'm like, why am I drinking this? And I might say, I'm drinking this because I really like the taste of white wine, which happens to be one of my favorite, dry white wine, ice cold. I love it. It's nice outside and I'm really craving something tart and cold, and I can drink a glass, but I know why I'm drinking it. And because Robin's here today, I can tell this story. Robin helped me film my videos for my website. And so he came and we set it all up, commercial, crew, production, all this stuff. And it was hard. And I had a voice coach there. And we spent a couple of hours. I had all this shitty makeup on and, like all this stuff you got to do when you're doing some production stuff. I was so outside of my comfort zone. The voice coach kept hitting me over the head and she's like, stop. Nobody wants to hear that shit. You got to start over. And she'd be like, sit up, turn this way, smile, cock your shoulder. It was just so much work because I really wanted a professional quality product. But when we were done, after a couple of hours of this, and Robin packs up, everybody gets ready to leave, and he knows the story I told him. I went to the kitchen counter. First thing I did was take the shirt off that I had on because I didn't like the color they picked for me. I put a black shirt on. I tried to smear all that makeup off my face, and I opened the refrigerator, and I saw my son loves Stella beer, and there were Stellas in the refrigerator. And I thought, I'm going to drink a beer. I'm going to drink a beer because right now I am way outside of my comfort zone. I really don't know how that just went. I got contorted and twisted and pushed in ways that were not natural for me. And so what I did was I opened the beer. But here's why I want to bring out the awareness piece of this for you. I said, I'm not doing this to escape and get drunk and totally just get out of this experience. I'm aware that from a very young age, I have been programmed, and it's in my book. I'm glad my mom's not here, but I'm going to tell the truth. It's in my baby book that at 9 months old was the first time I drank a beer. And 11 months old was the first time that I drank enough beer that my mom says, maybe you were just really sleepy. In my baby book, it says I got drunk and I kept crying for daddy's beer because it was hot outside. I was tired. My dad was doing racing. He raced motorcycles. So I was in an environment and was raised in an environment from a very young age of when you're not feeling something you want to feel. I was literally given beer to meet my needs as an infant. Think about that for a second. No judgment on my mom. She was a kid. And of course, it's 1972. They didn't come take babies away like they do now. And so in that moment of reaching in the refrigerator, I knew why I was doing that. I wanted something. I was hot. I was tired. I was overwhelmed. And I reached for the beer. And I'm like, I know this pattern, but I'm going to drink the beer. I stood at the kitchen counter and I downed that beer. I just guzzled it up and drank the whole beer. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to have a second beer. That tasted so good. And I drank the second beer and then I moved on with the rest of my day. But my point in giving you the graphic details on that is, you guys, we're all human. We're patterned with different things. I didn't beat myself up over it. I knew that I could go into escape hard. I knew what was challenging for me in that moment. And I was dealing with a lot of thoughts and feelings that they weren't normal. They were new. And so in that space, I hope that story inspires you. You move through a transition and you start to go, ooh, am I suppressing or repressing? Am I expressing? Am I escaping? Shopping, relationships, pornography. I can give you a list of stuff that we use to escape our reality. And everybody in the world does a lot of these. So we just kind of need to pull back the curtain and start having a conversation. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Because there's an emotion, there's literally an energy flowing through me that I either don't know how to handle, I'm inept in being able to handle it, so I'm going to give it away to somebody else by expressing it. I'm going to stuff it away by not dealing with it, or I'm going to try to numb it and run as far away from it as I can. And the truth is, out of all these three, guess what? That shit's going to still be there when you wake up because your thoughts are still inside of your mind that create the emotions that are still in your body. And you wake up the next day and you go, oh God, I feel like shit. I'm never going to do that again. And then what do? You do it again because you're in the hamster wheel. You're in the loop. And so my goal of teaching you guys this today is to, one, help you just wake up and be aware. So later in the book, I have some great worksheets on some questions that you could ask yourself about these 3 ways that you deal with emotions. As I begin to wrap up and leave you today, what's really cool is you can just ask yourself when you just shut up and sit. This is a mindfulness tool. When you shut up and sit, get a journal out, get a piece of paper. If you've got the book, use the book and get a pen out. And you start to ask yourself, what am I suppressing? What am I repressing? Why do I feel the need to express this particular feeling in the way that I'm expressing it? And then lastly, what am I choosing to escape rather than to lean in and actually work through? And so in mindfulness, we run up against ourselves, nobody else. And we shut up and we sit and we start to dialogue with that part of ourself. And when we do, we start to get answers. And if you're like, well, Yedda, I don't know the answers to those questions, ask the people in your life. What do you see me not dealing with? Ask people. There are people all over on the internet that share all kinds of cool stuff about self-inquiry and ways to go in. Just start to find a mechanism and a way that gets you to answer some really good questions about yourself, either for yourself or ask other people in a safe space to start to help you understand and see, what am I doing? And it's not as difficult as you think once you start the self-inquiry process. And the reason why I say, get out there and check out other resources. What I'm teaching you might be the process, but the tools of how you can do mindfulness, how you can go within in self-inquiry, guys, there's thousands of them. Thousands of ways that you could do it. So one of the ways I suggest is just getting the pen and paper out, getting really real with yourself. And you can use my questions. You can add questions to that. But we've got to start to shut up and sit and start to look inside and figure out, what are we doing with our emotions and where are they coming from? And as you do that, you start to get a little bit of space, which gives you a little bit of inner freedom. That inner freedom gives you a sense of control. And as I started the show, you are in control of your mind. It's not the other way around. You're not some helpless person that's on autopilot that doesn't have the ability to choose a different thought. You have the ability to choose the thought, and you have the ability, once you've chosen it, to see where the energy and the emotion takes you, and then how you handle that emotion is totally up to you. So because we're just doing this and I'm talking to you guys, I want to be real, but this stuff was life-changing for me. It was absolutely life-changing. And when I got that wake-up call and I decided to shut up and sit, I knew that we also needed to be taught the steps and what was happening and why it was happening. Because two things I want to say here. When I drove up to the studio today, every time we do an episode, I'm here at the mindfulness bar and just sitting literally at the bar. And you've heard me say, we just day drink silence here, which is true. There's literally a place across the street. And as I was parking is this Mexican joint. They've got a huge banner out front and it said happy hour, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Rob is shaking his head behind the camera. 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I'm like, God, happy hour used to be 5 o'clock. So we're so desperate to feel happy. And now businesses, of course, bars promote happy hours, guys, because it spikes the dopamine. Everyone's happy at a bar, but you're not happy when you go home and wake up at 1 a.m. You're not happy when you wake up at 6 or 7 a.m. and the alarm goes off and it's time to get back into the real world. So you make it through the day and you go back, and now we can go to the flipping bar at 11 a.m. We can't even get through our day. That's just crazy. So we promote happy hours, but they're not really happy. That's what I talk about. So we're literally a mindfulness bar stuck in the middle of the bar district in the investment banking district in Richmond, Virginia, because I'm going to put my banner out that says, I should put suffering hour, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. because we want people to come in and go, you can sit with it. We can teach you the way. You might just touch it for a hot second, but you can manage and maintain this process. I promise you. So the second thing that I wanted to say before I wrapped us up, because if you forgot, I didn't, was I wanted to give you the answer to how the rocks cry out. I thought this was really cool. So, what I know about our bodies and what you've learned in this episode today is it's all energy. It's all energy in motion. And so for me, as I started doing these readings and going deep into the quantum physics of understanding energy, because if thoughts are mental units of energy, they're in us, they affect our cells, and then they're moving, and then that energy radiates out. It's not contained, it radiates out. And so what I learned, it literally said in the book, everything is energy. Everything is energy, even the rocks. And here's what's fascinating to me on a quantum physics levels. If everything is energy, and every single molecule makeup, which we're all completely, totally unique, molecularly speaking, as human beings, if everything is energy, everything vibrates, it moves, it has a frequency. And so this frequency can be measured. Some frequencies you don't hear. Like, the dog whistle, you blow it, you don't hear it, but the dog hears it. And there's different frequencies. So rocks, the minerals, the makeups, atomic makeup, and the subatomic particles, and in the quantum kind of world that make up rocks, has a frequency. Everything and everyone on the planet has a frequency, and none of them are the same. So here's a question. Here's the question I went to, Robin. What would that sound like if you could hear the frequency of everything and none of it was the same? And Robin's a musician, so he's just kind of looking at me, and I'm thinking, Robin, what would that be like if, as a musician, think about the frequency of everything's got a different note. Everything has a different note. He's shaking his head. We're going to have to give him a microphone eventually. Literally, everything has a note. So forget the basic notes. We're talking everything's got its own individual note, and it's all playing all the fucking time. And if we could hear that, that's what it means when the rocks cry out. Everything is singing a frequency. So I imagine when I get into the awareness of my emotion, and I was thinking about this today, what's my theme song any given day? Sometimes it's Eye of the Tiger, right? I'm on the upward spiral and I'm like, yeah. And sometimes it's Back in Black, AC/DC. I'm down on the spiral. So we're all singing a song energetically. Even the rocks are singing a song. So when you think about that, then tell me how, when you walk out into the world, your song is not, and your note is not playing and impacting along with a greater orchestra of life. And so I made a commitment that I thought, I want to write some really cool fucking music. I want my frequency. I want my vibe. I want who I am to contribute to a song that lifts the world up into a place of love and joy and equanimity. That's what we're not teaching in mindfulness. And you don't learn this just by going into a cave and shutting up and getting quiet. There's a cognitive piece to being human. There's a part of this equation that I wanted to bring out into the world, because now that you know that, I don't know about you, but once I found that out, I thought, I'm totally down for shutting up and sitting. I want to go within. I want to know what music is playing inside of me, and I want to know how to make that music and consciously create it in a way that it inspires and lifts people up. So I keep going on about this forever, but I've gotten the hand signal, which I get, and it's time to wrap it up. On our next episode, I'm going to be coming back and I'm going to be bringing you just a little bit more on emotion, but I promise I won't be that intense. But what I am going to talk to you on the next one is actually what it's in my book. It's called the stop technique. And so we're going to actually get into a little bit. It'll be a little bit energetic. There's a really cool technique that you can stop the emotion, and I'm going to teach it to you, and then you can understand and decide where to go and what to do next. So I really have enjoyed this time together. I'd love to keep talking, but you're going to be able to catch me on the next episode, or you can listen to this one all over again. It doesn't really matter. But if you're curious about Shut Up and Sit, you can go to shutupandsit.com. We've got some cool resources there, how to access and get the book, the workbook, teaching some really cool online courses. We're going to be recording some videos so you can do some self-taught course stuff if you want on your own. And of course, one-on-one coaching is always an option. So you know how to reach me, shutupandsit.com. And until next time, have an absolutely emotionally stellar day. Take care.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. no contentment. May you be